Okay, guys, that was our 3-minute grounding time. I hope you feel refreshed and ready to go. So we'll go ahead and start our presentation. I did Boyce. And Lisa is with Utah State University. In case you weren't here last week and maybe didn't get a chance to watch last week's video, I'll just introduce her real quick. She's been consulting with H-PEP for many years. Gosh, Lisa, when I was still there in Hawaii working on projects, and she was our did our process evaluation, and she also does evaluation of projects. So she has a lot to say about supporting kids showing some challenging behaviors. So welcome, Lisa, and go ahead and start. So if everybody can mute except for Lisa, and then if you have a question, please just type it into the box. You can also raise your hand, and we can then you can then unmute and talk. So I'll leave it to you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just as a reminder, the slides that I am presenting are from the Center on Social and Emotional Foundation for Early Learning at Vanderbilt University, and the website's there. So there's more resources there that you can go to and get more information. The take that I am kind of what I'm adding to what's there is really incorporating the idea of temperament and our understanding of children's temperament. So that's the piece that I'm kind of bringing to the table and incorporating in what's already there. And hopefully you had a chance to do the temperament activity from last week, where I asked you to think about a child's temperament and list 6 traits or characteristics from that child's temperament, and then respond to the question, let me tell you about what it's like to be me, from, again, that you're in that child's thinking from that child's perspective, and then I don't like it when you, again, from that child's perspective, and it would help me if you would, from that child's perspective, from their temperament, as a way to kind of help you kind of get in the mindset of what we're going to talk about today with the behavioral support plans. What I'm asking you to do is to move from your general knowledge of classroom strategies and strategies for prevention that you do with your general, that are just general good practices. And I'm asking you to move to the individual level, to an individual child. And I'm asking you to individualize so that all your strategies are not going to be effective. I'm asking you to choose the ones that are relevant for that child. And I'm asking you to go even a little bit further and be creative and problem solve and come up with some unique strategies that aren't in the toolbox that everybody uses, that are really just going to be a good fit for you in your classroom with your child that you're working with. So that's what we're going to focus on now. So what we're talking about with these individualized positive behavior supports is that this is an approach for changing a child's behavior. So it's not stopping a child's behavior, it's changing the behavior. So the behavior is going to keep continuing, the function of the behavior will continue. It's just we're changing the actual behavior. It's based on humanistic values and research. And this approach is for developing an understanding of why the child has challenging behavior and teaching the child new skills to replace the challenging behavior. So that's the focus. The focus is on teaching, that we are going to do a lot with prevention, but our main focus is understanding the behavior and the function so that we can teach the child a replacement skill. So if we're just stopping a behavior, then that's not what this is about. It's not about stopping a behavior. It's about teaching a replacement skill so that this child leaves your classroom with a skill that he didn't come in with. So that's what we're focused on. And this is a holistic approach that considers all the factors that impact a child, the family, and the child's behavior. So thinking about this kind of from a little different perspective, maybe comparing the old way where we had these general interventions for all behavior challenges. And this new approach, and it's not really new, but it's more specific, where we're asking that the intervention match the purpose of the behavior. That we wouldn't be giving these general strategies for 3 or 4 kids. We want a specific intervention that's going to match the purpose of the behavior. The old way is the intervention is reactive, and now we're talking about an intervention that is proactive. So thinking back to last week, looking for those green teaching moments, instead of trying to teach during those red moments when a child is upset, when the behavior has already happened. And instead of focusing on behavior reduction, reducing the aggression, reducing the defiance, we're focusing on teaching new skills. So what is it the child's trying to do with that aggression? We want to teach a skill that replaces the aggression. We want to teach a skill. What is it the child's trying to do with that defiance? We want to teach a skill that replaces that defiance. And instead of this quick fix, we're looking for long-term interventions. We're looking for the social skills that allow a child to express themselves in a way that will continue through their life, and they're able to communicate what they're feeling, what their frustration is, so it doesn't come across as defiance, so that they're able to actually communicate and get their needs met, is what we're looking for. So when we're thinking about challenging behaviors with children, the reason that they do them is because it works for them. They wouldn't be doing them if they didn't work. So challenging behavior results in a child getting something. They're getting access to something or someone, they're obtaining something, or they're avoiding something or someone. It's an escape. They're avoiding going to science class, they're avoiding sitting during rug time. With the obtaining, they're obtaining the adult attention, they're obtaining the toy they want. There's something that's happening that they're getting, and that's why they're doing it. It works, and usually it works really quite well. So here I'd like to show this 2 video clips. Okay, so Sue, if you can pull off this slide. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that's Tim before the intervention. And now let me show you after the intervention with this support plan.
But then you need to put it where it goes, okay? It's a profile. What? Wow. Look, this profiler doesn't have a message on it.
Okay, okay. So Sue, if you can put that back up. Let's see. Okay, so what you saw with that first one, oftentimes we would describe as aggression. We would say he's aggressive, what's going on with him, what's going on at home, he needs to self-regulate better. But what, that's the form. That's the form is this aggression. But what's the function? What's the reason or the purpose of the communication of his behavior? What is it he's trying to do? And looking, there's another example of Tim where Tim's riding a trike on the playground bike path. He sees a child move to the sandbox where Tim had just finished building a roadway. He leaps off his trike and tackles the child. He hits the child. An adult comes over to intervene. She comforts the child and scolds Tim. Tim goes to the sandbox and continues construction on his roadway. So, yeah, so here he's, the child messed with his stuff and he got rid of the child. And he gets a scolding and then he goes back to his roadway. So this other situation with the video with Tim, he doesn't get the toy, he goes and leaps on the child, pulls her hair, and then what we don't see is the follow-up with him getting the toy. So it looks like what the communication is, the point of his challenging behavior is he wants to obtain something. So we could look at this as aggression, and we could focus on, okay, how do we reduce aggression in preschoolers? And we could just focus there. Okay, we've got to stop the behavior, and we've got to talk to his parents. We've got to let him know. We can think about what's causing the aggression. Does he have older siblings at home that he's fighting with? Is he watching too much TV that has violence on it? We can focus on that, or we can focus on what is Tim communicating? What is it that we can teach him? So the suggestion there about taking turns, okay? So taking turns and, extending that a little bit further, what is taking turns? You need to be able to understand some social skills and have some social skills are basic to taking turns, right? You need to be able to even be aware of somebody else and be aware of how to interact and have a friendship so that you can be able to have a reason to practice taking turns. So, thinking about this, we're quite a ways away from some pretty basic social skills. So if we're focused on reacting, and when Tim sits on this child and pulls her hair, and that's when we teach Tim, you can't take toys from your friends, you have to take turns. Or when he tackles somebody, when a child's coming by his roadway, and we focus on teaching him, that's our teaching moment, is no, you can't tackle your friends. That's not how we treat friends. We treat friends this way. you know, his emotions are high, and we haven't really got to the basics of recognizing that Tim has very immature social skills. He's far, far less ready for those social interactions than the other 3 and 4-year-olds his age. So we've got to back up quite a ways and teach some things that other kids have picked up on their own. And we've got to do some intentional teaching, perhaps. Maybe that's where we are. So thinking about looking at breaking apart this is thinking about, okay, let's break it apart. What's the trigger? So a child moves to the sandbox where Tim has just built something. The behavior is he tackles and hits the child. But the function is he wants access to the roadway. And that's important to think about, is what's the function of the tackle? And then the maintaining consequence. What is it that's making sure that Tim will continue to tackle the child in the future? The adult intervenes and scolds Tim and comforts the other child. And then Tim continues to build the roadway. So what's happened here is that Tim was reinforced. Tackle the child, get him out of the way, and you can keep building your road, right? So the teacher has reinforced the tackling. So how should we go about looking at these individual interventions? So looking at the these interventions, so I'm trying to get back so I can see the chats a little bit more and bring those in too. So the point that yeah, this is the time to teach these skills. This is when we want to teach the behaviors, those replacement skills. So we want to bring a team together, and that's our first approach. And the situation that I talked about last week with Dylan, and he's the little guy that was according what it looked like was choking the little girl, hitting her with a wrench, with a screwdriver. And we could just look at that and say, you know, the parents are, what are the parents doing? You know, this is crazy. We just need to bring the parents in and tell them what they need to be doing. We could do that because this behavior is so, the teachers described it as random. And to me, that is like the challenge word. I want to figure it out. When a teacher comes in and says that it's just random, it happens randomly, that is, yes, let's figure this out. I want to put on my Sherlock Holmes hat and go figure it out, because it's not random. There's a reason. There's a reason. And if it is truly random, then that child really needs a clinical psychologist. And that could very much be true. And so we need to make that referral. That's very important. So we brought these parents in and we talked to them, and we understood more about this child's temperament. I mentioned a little bit about that last week, of how he struggles with bright lights, with sounds, with large groups of people. And that was hard for us to pick up on because his language was advanced. His cognitive ability was advanced. He wasn't avoiding eye contact. He didn't have the behaviors that often you associate with children on the autism spectrum, that you would kind of go towards that. So we didn't really get that. And then, as I mentioned, last week as well, that when we talked to this little guy, Dylan, and found out that he wasn't actually sneaking up on this girl to strangle her with the string, he was trying to participate in their dramatic play and was putting a leash on this little girl. That then you understand that he didn't know how to enter social play. And so being able to get more information from the parents not only helped us in the classroom, but then also helped us with the parents to get on the same page when we started talking about how we were going to talk to the child, how we were going to work through some different routines, how important a schedule was for him, and some other strategies that we'll talk about. So that's an important first step. The next one is gathering this information. And this is hard to do when you're in the middle of everything and to really try to observe the child. Oftentimes we keep our own glasses on and our own story in our head when we observe a child in the middle of a situation. It's really helpful to be able to pull yourself out of managing the situation and observe. You're more likely to be able to see the world from the child's perspective and not have that running story in your head of why you think the child's acting like they are. You're more likely to try to be able to get the information from the child's perspective. And this point too, that we have that as adults we have behaviors that serve functions as well. Really understanding that and bringing it to your level, that you want somebody to understand you and your behaviors. You know, if you've ever been sharp with somebody or rude with somebody and you don't want to explain to them what happened that morning of why you're irritable or why you're upset, but you just want them to give you a break and not hold it against you. Have you had those mornings? You know, these kids have those too. So it's, you know, really to pull back and try to think from that child's perspective is really important. Let your preconceived ideas, let your story of what you think is behind the child's behavior, set that aside and just observe the child. One thing that I was really impressed with one of my teachers in this situation with a 2-year-old who had started biting. She started biting other kids, and the parents were very embarrassed. The other parents didn't want their child around that child, and this teacher just really started to observe when the biting happened. She started looking at the records, and she noticed that when the child was biting was when there were times that the children were waiting for something, or the child was trying to enter play. So the biting wasn't this aggression necessarily, but it was pretty intentional. It was, I'm bored, I don't really know what to do with my body kind of thing. Or I'm excited and I'm not sure what to do. So, you know, if you think about, a lot of times as adults, people who are in those situations, they might go out for a smoke. They might do other things, but 2-year-olds can't do that. So sometimes she sucks on her hands. She would suck on her hands a lot. And sometimes she would bite someone else. When she bit someone else, all of a sudden, waiting in line wasn't boring anymore, because there was just like all this drama that happened. And it was so much more interesting than just waiting in line. And so if you understood where that was coming from, you would approach it in a very different way than if it was just aggression or to get something they wanted. So really observing and gathering information. So this functional assessment, there's higher levels of functional assessment that are done that people are trained in. And this is more of this approach of the not as in-depth as that. So this is really just more using the terms as let's assess the function of the behavior, and not in the more sophisticated terms of functional assessment. But this is a process for developing an understanding of a child's challenging behavior and how the behavior is governed by the environmental events. And a portfolio of information that provides you with data, these observations, and information to understand the child, and then what hopefully it results in the identification of the purpose or the function of the challenging behavior. So that's what we're looking at here. So the process then is to observe the child, collect the data, talk to people who are most familiar with the child, and then review records. And in that example with the child who was biting, just looking at the incident reports helped to see over time where it was that was happening. So there's some observation cards that have been made up that kind of set this up. So that they kind of set up how you might do these observations and how to come up with this possible function at the bottom. And the possible function it's in caps, and this is where we're headed. So the challenging behavior, you notice, is there, but it's not the focus of the observation. What we're looking at is we want the context, we want you to note what the behavior is, but we also want to look at what the reaction is, and then look at and hypothesize what the function is. And so that you can then know what replacement skills to teach so that we can focus on teaching. Okay, so let's go to another vignette. So can you pull this down, Sue, again? Okay, here we go. Okay, let's go back and put the PowerPoint back up. And maybe if you could just enter in your chat box what you see as the function of his behavior in that interaction. So yeah, so these ideas that he didn't have the words to interplay, to greet, or to be part of the class, that he's trying to join in with the other children, that he wants to interact with others, he wants to be part of the class. So yeah, so that's what we're getting at, is the function of the behavior. And that's what we want to focus on right here, is what's the function. So this is how we could fill out this card, is that this social context that he's playing alone in block play. He goes over to the group of children And then the behavior. He sticks out his tongue, he makes raspberry sound, he hits the boy, scratches his shoulder, and then the social reaction. The boy yells at him, but a friend brings him a lizard, and the boy yells to the teacher. And so here then, we just want to get to the function that is to initiate social interaction and join play. So right there, we want to just say for, okay, this little guy, Tim, what's his function? We want to focus on Tim. And just say, okay, for Tim, here's our observation, here's our function. So that's what we're focused on, because this is an individualized support plan. And so this is all about Tim. And so we're just focusing on what it is that he's doing. So then what we want to do is develop a hypothesis, or our best guess for Tim and his behaviors. And we could, with these hypothesis statements, we want to talk about what triggers the challenging behavior, the description of the challenging behavior, the responses that maintain the challenging behavior, and the purpose of the behavior for Tim. And you have all of your regular preventative strategies and other strategies. Okay.
Yeah, right there. That's slide.
The slide. Okay. Okay. So so here we have kind of a chart that's helpful in kind of mapping out the moving forward with this individualized support plan. So we have the triggers, the behaviors, then our hypothesis about what the function is, and then the maintaining consequences of what it is that we hypothesize is maintaining these behaviors. So we want to focus on this also, because each one of these, then we're going to try to develop preventions for the triggers, new skills to replace the behaviors, and new responses to make sure that we're not maintaining the consequences of those behaviors. So here's just a hypothesis statement in words for what it was that was on that in the box. But if you're not sure about the hypothesis, then here are some questions you can ask yourself. What would make the challenging behavior stop? Is it something you would provide or allow the child to access? Or is there something to remove? Or can you allow the child to leave? So asking yourself these questions may help you identify what it is that may be the reason behind the challenging behavior. Some challenging behaviors may have the same form but serve multiple functions. And some challenging behaviors may begin around one function, such as escape, and continue to serve another function, such as gaining attention. Okay, so now we want to get to this part of designing the behavior support plans. But developing that hypothesis of what the form is the most critical part. And there's a lot of variables to explore. There's some that we just don't know. Maybe the child didn't sleep well. Maybe in most cases, he would go to his science class just fine, or he would allow a child into the block corner with him. But on some days, he just doesn't feel well. Maybe he has an ongoing, maybe he has type 1 diabetes that hasn't been diagnosed or that's not being maintained well. There may be some health issues. There may be some learning environments that can be adjusted. There can be some situations that are related to the home and family. Some interactions, there could be communication to the child, emotional support, some attachment issues, issues with friends, with instruction, with transitions. There's lots of areas that we can look at to try to make things, to try to address and make these behaviors, help the child be more receptive to prevention strategies, and to also help the child learn these replacement skills. And children who have a little bit of a tougher time, their temperament with change and are more reactive, if we understand that, then there's things we can do that can help be the way that we teach these skills, we can be more aware of and help them be able to be more receptive to learning those skills. Okay, so we've got the behavior hypothesis, and now we want to look at prevention strategies. And you mentioned a lot of these last week, and a lot of in your comments today about some prevention strategies as well. What are some ways to make events and interactions that trigger challenging behavior easier for the child to manage? And these are critical, these are important, and we should keep doing these. So some prevention strategies, they just help the child to be more successful with the environment or activity or interaction. They might entail many of the strategies you already use in your classroom. And then some are individually selected and linked to the context and triggers for that behavior. So they may be more focused. So sorry, I skipped that one. So thinking about these prevention strategies, you can ask yourself these questions. How can the environment be changed to reduce the likelihood that the challenging behavior will occur? Are there things we can just change in the environment? One thing that we did with the little guy, Dylan, that I spoke about last week, is we had 26 kids in the class, and we had 26 kids for large group. There's no reason to have, when we had 4 teachers in the classroom, to have a large group with 26 kids. So we just split it. The kids had outdoor time for 30 minutes, while half the kids had large group, and then we just switched them and had the 13 kids go for their outside time, while the other 13 kids came in for a large group. So that just helped with a lot of the children being able to attend. But there's not a rule written anywhere that large group has to be all the kids. There's nothing that says that. 13 is plenty of kids for large group. And that's something we could change, and it could just really help the kids attend better. And then we weren't having to ask the kids to manage so much of their own ability to attend when we could make that adjustment for them. What can be done to make the challenging behavior irrelevant? That it doesn't matter. Can we reduce the number of transitions? Can we reduce the wait time? Can we change wait time so that when those things come up, where those challenging behaviors are, it just doesn't matter because we don't need that there. What procedures can I select that fit in the natural routines and structure of the classroom? And then how can I build on what works? What can be done to help the child not respond to the trigger or change the trigger so it doesn't cause challenging behaviors? And so these are things that if we really understand what the child's triggers are and really understand the child's temperament, we can think about ways that we could just make this a little bit easier on that child. And then help that child develop more coping strategies as they mature. So some sample prevention strategies for the escape when a child wants to get out of that situation is we can modify expectations, materials, instructions, seating arrangement, the ways we expect the child to respond. Yeah, so that's great that you were able to make modifications with the group sizes as well. Sometimes we just need to review the rules. We can use choice, we can reduce distraction or competing events. there's some things we can do that just helps the child be more comfortable in the situation that they're trying to escape. If we understand what it is about the situation that is so challenging for that child that they want to get out of it, there may be something that we can do that they can just be there. We have one child that just doesn't want to do singing. And we noticed that during the singing time, the child's back would be turned to the music, to the group. And the child we thought was just avoiding the group. But then we noticed that the child with their back turned was still singing along. So we could be insisting that all the children face the center and face the singing teacher. But if this child has their back turned and is still singing, and that's one way that maybe they need to kind of only take in so much at one time, and they're still participating with their back turned, isn't that okay? Instead of totally escaping and leaving, and then as the child becomes more comfortable, turn them in? Can a child have a desk that's separate? Can a child use a different format for responding to problems and questions? Something that they're more comfortable with than holding a pencil or something? You know, there's different things we could do if we understand what it is that is the reason for the escape. And using visual supports. So the obtaining, there's some prevention strategies that if we understand the difference between escape and obtain, that we might use, that we may be able to focus more. We can modify activities, so the length of them, or how we give the instructions, or the response mode. We can provide peer support. We can have more frequent attention. We can use an activity schedule. We can practice. That was something that was brought up with the having role play, or like these scripted stories that you have a handout on that kind of talks about that, how you put the child's name in the story to kind of have them be part of that. You can review the rules. Again, you can use choice manipulatives. You can use timers, you know, that say, you know, we agree, you know, can you stay here 3 minutes or 5 minutes? Okay, well, I'll do the timer. And then 3 minutes, okay, then let's go. And as soon as the timer rings, okay, you can be dismissed. And, you know, different things like that, that you're really working with the child on where their abilities are for that moment, because not all children can attend for 10 minutes. But we want the child not to run, not to hit, not to kick the child next to them. We want them to be able to say and communicate, I need a break, and to have it be spelled out in a way that as a 6-year-old, as a 10-year-old, as an adult, we recognize this is our attention span, and this is how I need to negotiate how to leave. Okay, so in the slides, there are just some examples that you can look at that are just some different prevention strategies and how you can incorporate those. I wanted to get to the point of actually coming up to the replacement skills and this focus on teaching new skills. And here we really want to focus on teaching this alternative behavior to the challenging behavior. And then replacement skills, they have to be efficient and effective. They need to work quickly for the child because the challenging behavior worked quickly for the child. So consider the skills the child already has, and then make sure the reward for the appropriate behavior is consistent. So this is really important because the maintaining consequences for the challenging behavior were very consistent. And so we need now to make sure that when we're teaching these replacement skills, that we can be right on that and rewarding those replacement skills. So we want to make sure we have a functional equivalence, identify an acceptable way that the child can deliver the same message. Make sure the new response is socially appropriate and will access the child's desired outcome, and teach the child a skill that honors the function of the behavior. So if we look at this, this little equation here on the competing behavior. So we ask the child to join the circle for circle time. We come here and the child screams and resists, so the teacher lets the child out of the activity and the child escapes. So that's what's been happening. So now what we want the child to do is stop. We want to teach the child something other than scream and resist to get out of the activity. Now we want to make sure we're teaching the child something that honors that same function, that the child can leave the activity. So here we ask the child to join the circle. The child sits in the circle and participates, or the child sits and then gestures all done. We teach the child that that's how they leave the circle. So the child gestures all done, the teacher lets the child out of the activity, and the child escapes. So here we've taught a socially appropriate skill that the child can replace with that challenging behavior. So then we go to the child sits in the circle and participates, and then the teacher provides attention and praise, and the child stays. And so that's what we're working towards, is more and more of that. And so that's what we're talking about with that positive there. Okay, so and so for the escape, so then what kinds of replacement skills can we teach? Request a break. We can set goals. We can have them request help. We can set up a schedule and help them understand and follow the schedule so that they have some control. With our little guy Dylan from that I spoke about last week, we had him outline the schedule. We kind of wrote the words and he drew the pictures. And so, and when we worked with his family, at the end of the day, he was going to feed the ducks. And so he carried that schedule, he folded it in his pocket and he carried it around with him so that when he was kind of getting a little agitated, the teacher would say, pull out your schedule, what's next? And he would pull out his schedule and he would look at it, and then he would walk through it to see what's next and see what it was that he would get at the end of the day, what he would be doing that he was kind of working towards. And that really helped him to do that. And it helped him anticipate the transitions. It helped him anticipate what was coming up. And he just had this sense of some control because he wasn't waiting for the teacher to tell him what to do. He had that already mapped out for him. And he had this reward at the end of the day for making it through the day with being with being nice to his friends all day. So obtaining, again, following the schedule, participate in routine, the self-management, teach delay of reinforcement, request attention. Just saying, I need, teacher, I need you. Teacher, will you do this? And then being able to get that in that positive way. So then it's critical then to focus on this designing that replacement skill and how you're going to teach it. So really being focused on the method of instruction and then teaching it throughout the day, not just those red teacher moments. And practice teaching, have that child practice that skill. And then making sure that adults are responding and reinforcing when it is that child is doing that replacement skill. Just making sure you're right on that. And that child is getting that attention when they're doing that replacement skill. Sometimes we forget to do that when the behavior is going well, but we've got to be doing that for those pro-social skills. That's what's going to be making a difference. And then making sure we're responding in a way that doesn't maintain the challenging behavior. So here's some examples, the previous slide for escape and for obtain, to be able to respond to those skills. Okay, so the last few slides, I want us to be able to have the time to go out into our focus groups, because you've got some great ideas and suggestions. So I want to, the last few slides you can go through, but it's really just walking through what we've been talking about. Sorry, it's and spelling it out on the chart of going through the process for this example with Tim. And so you'll have access to these slides, and then you can just see how it's played out with for Tim.